For more on the impact of Novo's landmark findings, let's bring in Mizuho healthcare sector strategist Jared Holz. Jared, great to have you with us.
Thank you.
We knew about this 20% reduction. So were there any disappointments, even at the margins, in this data, which caused the stock to pull back and the device makers to bounce?
Yeah, there weren't too many issues here. I think the things that the street was picking at, one, the international population did a lot better than participants from the U.S. So that was an abnormality that investors thought was odd and needs to be reconciled somehow between, now and, the next study that Novo presents. I think the second thing is it did not hit statistical significance on death, but it was still very impressive. Just if you want to nitpick on the fringe in terms of the study in detail, that did not hit. Other than that, I thought it was very, very clean, and I think that's why you saw the stocks recover today when they were down early.
I don't know if you saw Dr. Eric Topol's Substack on the select data, but he was sort of questioning how many people actually had an absolute reduction in the events, given the price and given how long you had to. So he said an absolute reduction of the primary endpoint is only 1.5 for every 100 people directed. The cost is over $1,000 a month, and you had to be on this regime for more than 3 years to achieve that endpoint. How should we start to think about this in terms of how much the drug has run up and the realities of what you achieve for that price?
Yeah, well, there are certainly issues, and I think it's going to be a case-by-case basis, and I think it's going to be determined by the patients and the doctors to sit down and kind of understand how much benefit that they expect each patient to get over time. That was the one other thing from the trial that I think the street had a little bit of an issue with, is there was clear separation at the beginning, almost immediately, and then during year 3, the curves kind of converged and then improved going forward. I think the issue is how many patients actually benefit significantly longer term, and what defines longer term, where we are in that cycle. It's very hard to know, but I thought it was an interesting perspective.
That sort of, I don't want to say nitpicking, but those sorts of commentaries and critiques, does that make it less likely that there is reimbursement unless these drugs are approved by Congress? Weight loss drugs as a class are approved by Congress to be covered by Medicare. Can it be covered as a cardiovascular drug?
I think it can. It's debatable. Obviously, the managed care companies are going to try to push back on any therapy that's available, at least widely, and for this sort of a population. That, to me, is the biggest overhang on these stocks, if there is one. I mean, they haven't traded like there is, but if we want to kind of introduce a debate, it's going to be broader coverage and then pricing longer term.
Jared, so just getting away from this study to more broadly, so we believe, I think, Novo Nordisk has a 17% reduction-ish versus Mounjaro at maybe about 21%. And so when Mounjaro is more widely available, how much do you think they will take away from Wegovy? And what is it priced for? How are the stocks priced relative to one another for that, what would seem like an eventual move with high likelihood, right?
Yeah, I think once it becomes more widely available, patients that are just looking at this from a weight loss standpoint and nothing else would probably opt to get Lilly's drug because the percentage of weight loss is higher. Obviously, they're both going through some supply constraints at the current time. Novo put a press release out on Friday. They're investing $6 billion to get manufacturing up that can satisfy demand, which is, I think, very significant. But yeah, I think the Lilly drug, there's no doubt that their data so far has been better. And I think that's why you saw that stock kind of diverge away from Novo today when they were both down early. Lilly was the one that got bought more aggressively. I think the street or investors believing that whatever we saw this weekend from Novo is going to be even better going forward for Lilly.
Jared, you talk to a lot of investors. When you look at these two names, it seems like that's all that people want to talk about in this space. There has to be others. They're up, Lilly's up 100% off its 52-week lows. Novo's up 80-some% or so. They're over $1 trillion in combined market cap. Where else can investors look if they believe that this is a mega trend and they don't want to pay? The valuations are really steep for pharma right here.
Agree. I think it's responsible to diversify away from these as well. I mean, I think they're great, obviously, but this has been the only storyline for 18 months in healthcare. We've barely talked about anything else. I think Merck is interesting in pharma, trades 12 times next year. Obviously, Keytruda is this massive drug that will eventually erode towards the end of the decade, but they've done certain things from a business development standpoint to kind of offset that already. I think are they behind the 8 ball? A little bit. Possibly, but I think it's attractive. AstraZeneca did a deal last week for a phase 1 oral obesity drug. No idea if it's going to work, but I feel like the market value that we've seen created for Novo and Lilly is so monstrous that even if it's mediocre, it's probably worth something. So maybe those two are worth looking at if you want to diversify away from these winners.